Hello, friends, and welcome to the July 30th edition of Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly opportunity for mainstream Texans of faith to learn about public policy issues here in the great state of Texas and have a conversation about how you can engage in the process. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Outreach Director, and today's episode is being brought to you by Methodist Healthcare Ministries of South Texas. And today, we are excited to be joined by Laura Peralta-Schulte, Senior Government Relations Advocate with Network Lobby for Catholic Social Justice, to talk about the federal stimulus bill that is being considered by Congress as we speak, hopefully. This conversation is part of our special series highlighting speakers with the Washington Interfaith Staff Community, or WISC. But before we do that, I'd like to take a moment at the top again to recognize the craziness that is going on in the world. Y'all, it is an election year, and there is a lot of noise hitting our social media and televisions every day. And that's in addition to the global health pandemic, double-digit unemployment, protests for racial justice. And today, as we're recording, our country is remembering one of the true giants in our nation's history, and Congressman John Lewis. And so with all of that going on, it is more important now than ever for Texans of faith to be active and engaged in civic life. And I've been proud to see you all responding in real time, seeing the legislative engagement groups meeting with representatives by Zoom, seeing the rapid response team members lighting up the phone lines. And we certainly have a lot of advocacy work to do in this environment. But I also hope that you are participating fully in our Texas Faith Votes campaign. We hope that you will covenant with Texans of faith across the state to organize your communities to pledge to vote and vote safely by encouraging vote by mail for those who are eligible. You can go to texasimpact.org and click on the voting link to take the pledge and to find additional resources. And I also want to highlight our online series of faith and democracy events that are coming up. Our next event features some incredible talent from the Dallas area and some wonderful congregations and co-sponsors. That event's scheduled for August 23rd. You can register and get more information at texasimpact.org, or you can email me at scott@texasimpact.org for questions about that event or anything else that I've talked about. So y'all, this is an important time for Texans of faith to raise our voices. The world needs Texans of faith like you to be active and engaged, speaking out for justice and working to bring it about through advocacy and at the ballot box. So I hope that we can covenant together to make that positive change this year. So with all that, I welcome to the conversation Laura Peralta-Schulte. Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
What a pleasure to be with you. And I just want to say a big amen. Being in Washington, I know that my work is important, but the most important work that happens is back in the district. Because as you know, politics is local. So if they're not hearing from their constituents, you know, we don't get where we need to go.
There you go, friends. So there's the challenge. We've got some work to do. So let's jump in, Laura. So a lot of our listeners might not, or some of our listeners might not be familiar with Network Lobby, even though we just had Sister Quincy on a couple of weeks ago. So why don't you tell us about Network Lobby, about your work, and how you're connected with other faith leaders through WISC?
Sure. So happy to do so. So Network Lobby was, or is a group that was founded in the 1970s, early 1970s. It was a period in the Catholic Church where there was kind of an opening to the world. And we were founded by Catholic sisters, many of who were in hospitals or in schools or social workers who made the decision that if they really wanted to see the change that they knew was necessary, they had to kind of leave the side of working with people and really move to a policy space where they were changing structures. That's how we were founded. We've grown from then. We've been around for a number of years now. We are not all Catholic sisters now. We also have folks of many faith engaged in our office and our network. So we say that we are open to all who share our passion for justice and work, though, in the federal advocacy space to make structural change.
So speaking of the federal advocacy space, that is certainly the world that folks are paying attention to right now. And one of the reasons we're doing this series, right? And so I had to go back and look at the date. The House of Representatives passed the HEROES Act on May 15th, which is a sweeping stimulus or relief bill. It's now July 30th. Where are we in the process of getting something passed?
So that is the $1,000,000 question, Scott. You've got your finger on the pulse.
You have the answer for us, yeah.
Oh yeah, boy. I think we need some intervention for the answer. But I will just let you know that there was a very clear strategy following the passage of HEROES by both the White House and Republican leadership in the Senate, that they did not want to, put forward another new big package. HEROES is over $3 trillion of supports. So they had a strategy which they called the pause. And so I think what they were really doing is two things. One, just making sure that the implementation of the CARES Act was fully realized. I think that's very fair. The second piece was really more about Republican politics, because, as you know, that caucus is split between folks who, like your Senator, Mr. Cruz, who think that we've done everything we need to do. We just need to open up businesses and let the world flourish. And other Republicans that are more inclined to really see that this COVID virus is not under control and that we do need more support. I'd say in terms of process, you do know that a Republican bill, White House and the leadership on the Senate side dropped this week. It is called the HEALS Act, the Health Economic Assistance, Liability Protection in Schools Act. I would just say from the faith community's perspective, very little of what our community, the WIS community, was looking for in that package was there. So we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that we are working with Republican members, Democratic members in the Senate, and with our friends in the House to try to get as much of our agenda put into that package.
So we all know somebody, and certainly our congregations all have families who are hurting. Look at the data every day. We have double-digit unemployment. We have, just this morning, historically bad economic data coming out. This pandemic has caused real pain to a lot of families. So I'm wondering what you see as the key provisions that are under consideration that we should be thinking about that protect working families. What should we be looking at?
So there, and I think one of the challenges, Scott, is there's so many important provisions that working families need. You've got the medical, the medical needs coming from the pandemic. And, clearly, as you're suggesting today in the new numbers, the unemployment numbers, you have so many people that are losing their jobs and losing their income. And I think there was a hope and a prayer that the pandemic would pause and maybe, magically drift away. But, the summer pause has not happened. And you're in Texas and you see what's happening in terms of the expansion. So there are a multitude of issues that we need to be concerned with. What I really was thinking of focusing on today was what I was talking to one of your members from Dallas, and he just reminded us how important cash is. So, there are economic supports that are in play right now, ranging from cash assistance to unemployment insurance to some longer term structural changes that I think if we work hard, we can lock in. So that was kind of where I thought I'd initially start. Clearly, there are health pieces and food and housing moratoriums that we need to secure as well. But those, I think, are winnable, and they're particularly important because your members are particularly important.
Yeah. So what are the differences between the two bills, and And what should we be talking to our members of Congress about, specifically on the cash assistance and unemployment?
Sure. So let me just then start. The way that I look at it is we've got 3 asks on this piece, and what I would call 2 short-term asks and 1 structural ask, and we'll just have to see how the package kind of rolls out. The good news, let me start with the good news, is that in the HEALS Act, probably the only issue that we've been working on that appears in that act is cash assistance. So a second round of cash assistance. Now, we have been arguing for a while that these should be recurring payments, because a check in July or August is great, but that doesn't, take care of people's financial needs over the long term. But suffice to say, there is an attempt at this point to limit the size of the package. So we were really happy to see another round of checks. The nice thing is, too, they also cured some of the initial problems coming out of the CARES Act. As you may remember, they did not allow cash payments for kids over the age of 16. So the Republican plan has that. They did not include cash payments for adults with disabilities living in parents' homes, which is often the case. So they've taken care of that one too. The space we need to lean into, and Texas in particular needs to lean into, is that once again, they have left immigrant families behind. So these are mixed status families that will not, under this plan again, get a cash payment. For Texas, we are talking about, there's almost 2 million Texans, let me say tax-paying Texans, because we're not talking about cash payments for anybody other than people who pay taxes. There are 2 million Texans who stand to not get a cash payment. This is at a time when 69% of Latino families have been hit by job losses. So it is really important. I don't think we're going to be able to politically get everybody covered, but at minimum, we are trying to say that if you're doing anything on this issue, you've got to at least make sure that spouses who have Social Security numbers get a check, their children get a check, or even if a parent doesn't have a Social Security number, but their kids are U.S. citizens, we need to make sure that those kids are getting a check, because we know those families are in desperate need. Right now, we're talking about 1 million families. If we can make this adjustment, 1 million families in Texas who will get checks. And I tell you, the most important player in this whole game is your Senator, Mr. Cornyn, because he is on the committee and he can get this done.
So 1 million based on the mixed status families?
So in total, there's 2 million families that will not get a check.
Okay.
We know that the White House will in no way allow, and remember, they have to be part of the deal, will in no way allow for all tax-paying immigrant families to get a check. We need a change in politics for that.
Right.
What we are saying is minimally, we need to make sure at least that everybody who has a Social Security number in a family gets a check. And so that would mean that almost 1 million Texas families would get a check because they are either married to somebody who has an I-10 or they are children of somebody. So there is a bill right now by Senators Rubio from Florida and Tillis from North Carolina that goes part way. What we need Mr. Cornyn to do is to say, I'm not leaving the kids behind. I'm not leaving 1 million people in my state behind, and make sure that happens in the context of that bill.
Okay. I'm scribbling notes while we're talking, so
I can send you notes. Don't worry.
Look at this again later.
Yes.
So that's the ask on cash assistance. Where are we on unemployment, and what's the ask there?
So that is the second near-term basket because people need cash. And so what we have is in the HEALS Act, the Republicans really, I was so pleased to see this. They at least had my just so you know, my expectations are low, Scott. So so I just have to preface it with that. They did include an expansion of a supplemental benefit, but their proposal dropped the benefit from $600 per week to $200 per week. What that means for Texas is that it is an individual person getting unemployment, that is about a 42% drop in benefit. And so I looked up the numbers as well for what does that mean for economic losses writ large in Texas, because remember, people use this money to pay their rent, to pay for food and other essentials. So a loss of benefits per week, it's about $508 million per week lost benefits to the state of Texas. If you just look at those numbers through the end of September, you're talking about $4.6 billion of money that is not going into the pockets of Texans. So we are working really hard to make sure that we get as close to $600 as we can. That is in the HEROES Act. That will be part of the negotiation. But particularly, you're looking at unemployment spiraling right now, bad numbers today. People need money in order to meet their needs and avoid catastrophe.
There are a lot of strong opinions on my social media feed about this issue. What's your argument for keeping the $600?
Oh my gosh! So the biggest argument on the floor that your member, one of your members, Mr. Cruz, was engaged in as the CARES Act passed, is that for some reason people think that if you give these generous benefits, that people will not return to work. So I will just say that the groups working on this issue asked researchers at Yale to actually look at what happens. And I can share a study that just came out this week, Scott. Lo and behold, it appears from the research that, in fact, there is no evidence that recipients of more generous benefits were less likely to return to work. They also found that workers who received larger increases in their unemployment benefits relative to wages did not experience greater declines in employment after the CARES Act was passed. So, Scott, I always think it is kind of a convenient, how do I say this? It is that when the argument has been about benefits for workers, at the same time, the CARES Act passed, which gave both the cash payment and the $600 to unemployed workers. Republican leadership slipped in a little-known tax bill. We lovingly refer to it as the millionaire's giveaway. It is a tax benefit to hedge fund donors. So it impacts 43,000 hedge fund donors and gives them tax relief of $1.6 million apiece. So all this floor discussion about penny penny, the sky is falling. We are giving working families $600 a week and a cash payment, when at the same time they slipped in a giveaway to millionaires. It is. I just pause because that to me raises the issue of truthfulness. You know what I mean? We do know, frankly, that downtown, the commercial side is lining up for extra cash benefits and extra support, whether or not they need it. And we're just arguing, workers need a fair shake. Their families need to survive, and our government should be supporting them during this time.
Amen. Anything else on the cash side, or you want to talk some about the structural changes that?
So I would just say really briefly, because this really does get to the need. It is ironic in this country where everybody is or so often the conversation is about how people are taxed too much. It is horrifying to us, the fact that you actually have people in this country who are taxed into poverty. They are taxed into poverty. There are 5 million hardworking, low-income American workers who are taxed into poverty every year. There are also some of the best tax systems, tax structures to assist families, like the child tax credit. You have a situation where, for example, in the 2017 tax bill that was passed, they lifted the eligibility for people that make up to $400,000, but they did nothing for families that struggle. What does that mean? That means a third of American children, 26 million American children, do not get the benefit of the child tax credit. Those are precisely the kids who need the help. So in the HERO, we were able to get an expansion of the earned income tax credit, the theory being that nobody should be taxed into poverty. Who am I talking about? We're talking about people who don't have kids. So it is the foster care young man who is out of the foster care system and working a low-paid job. It is the struggling college student who's going to school and working and is taxed into poverty. It is the elderly person who might be working at 65 who doesn't have kids carrying in their home but is getting ready for retirement. These folks are all being currently taxed into poverty. Overwhelming folks, Black and brown communities, and we say the structure needs to change. On the child tax credit side, we are calling for full refundability. What does that mean? That means right now, 50% of Black and brown kids are ineligible for this credit. What this will do, if we can get this in this bill, is cut child poverty by 50%. So it's kind of a short-term, long-term thing. So up front, we want to make sure people have cash to meet their needs. As we come into what we know will be a long recession, we want to make sure that there is a structural change so that our families who are struggling are not going to be taxed into poverty and are going to have the support they need to raise their kids in dignity and in health.
So I agree that first and foremost, we should be trying to figure out how to economically protect working families. The other question I'd have for you is relating to other issues in this kind of broad stimulus bill that we should be paying attention to. And we've had folks come on the program over the course of the last few weeks who've talked about funding for voting and voting for SNAP and funding for states whose budgets are all in crisis. I know we've had conversations with our legislative engagement groups over the last couple of weeks about the choices the Texas legislature is going to have to make next year. But are there any other updates that or are there any things you think we should be paying attention to or talking to our members about right now?
Yes. And that is again, because this is an all of the above strategy, and we were able to get so much, the WISC community in turn, and with the help of folks like you, to get good stuff in that package. Most concerning to me right now is the fact that the federal moratorium on evictions has lapsed. What does that mean? It means that we are starting to see numbers of individuals moving forward to evict people out of their homes in the middle of a pandemic. That Scott, I don't know how you wrestle with that, other than to say, to lose your house in the middle of a pandemic and to go out on the street is a recipe for disaster. So we are very focused on trying to make sure that that people don't lose their houses, and calling on lawmakers and the administration to reinstitute that moratorium. That's a minimum standard. You're right that state funding issues are critical across the states. I imagine your state's Medicaid bill, as well as preparation for schools, and just the whole host of state activities that need to happen with dwindling resources. Texas is not alone I think the good thing is there's a good and a bad in this issue. One, cynically, the Republican leadership continues to say that the state funding issues is a, quote, Democratic issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's an American issue. And so we have been working with partners really around the country to have state leaders weigh in with their members to urge assistance. There is some assistance in the HEALS Act for schools. Unfortunately, some of it peeled off for the issue of private schools and all the bells and whistles. It's not enough. It's not enough. So keeping the pedal to the metal on that is going to be key. SNAP, nothing in HEALS on SNAP. Go to any of your churches or synagogues or temples, and you are going to see that is long lines and hungry people. And voting, no money for voting. So, so we've got our work cut out for us.
So our folks will always ask, so what do I do with all this information now? I assume the telephone calls this week are to our two senators. Any recommendations or advice there?
Yes. Well, you're there. So, Scott, the key, I would say there's almost two different messages potentially for your senators. Urgency is a key message for both. I think Senator Cruz is playing a important role in blocking movement forward. He has argued, as you've probably seen in your papers, that we're fine. Thank you very much. We don't need any more spending. So the more that folks can really impress upon him that, no, we actually do need assistance and people are hurting, it is helpful. Senator Cornyn is really interesting. And importantly, he sits on the committees that deal with the three issues I laid out: cash assistance, refundables, UI. He also has the key committee that he sits on deals with Medicaid. So trying to get money for the Medicaid program and healthcare writ large. That I would suggest that and given his political dynamic, he's really open to movement forward on some of these, and I think that should be affirmed. Talking, we've got a short time. The worst thing I can imagine is that we don't get a deal and it slips into September, and we are talking about people that are hungry and homeless. But I think if we work hard in the next week and a half to urge action, it'll be very positive.
Any closing thoughts about what Texans of Faith should be paying attention to or what we should be doing right now?
So I will just close with what you opened with, Scott. Right now, the way that we are looking at it is we've got to do everything we can to make sure that our people are protected. So the advocacy in the next 2 weeks is core to deal with the short-term issues and maybe longer-term issues related to COVID. But you're opening them up about political engagement is the key, because having been in Washington way too long, I just see very clearly that for things we care about, those are not always shared priorities with current political leadership. And if we want to make some very substantive changes, we've got to do a better job at being engaged at that level to make structural change. So I liked your opening. I affirm your opening.
Thanks. Thank you.
And again, the folks in our community, what we're doing in Washington is helpful, important, but what you're doing back home seals the deal.
All right. Well, appreciate those kind words. Anything you'd like to shamelessly plug today? Where can we find more information on your work?
Sure. So we, again, Network Lobby is networklobby.org. Just join us. We've got all kinds of tools on the website. We, too, are shifting into voter outreach. And Sister Quincy is going to be one of our leaders there. So we would love to stay in touch and see what kind of magic we can make in the fall.
We'll look forward to working with you on that. I should also ask, do y'all have kind of your talking points or asks on the legislation that's moving forward, the HEALS Act, online somewhere, either Network Lobby or WISC?
Sure. What I can do is, Scott, I can send it to you. The WISC, we just sent a letter up to the Hill with our priorities that I can share with you. Network also has an action alert that we are sharing, and it really is focused on trying to create urgency around housing, SNAP, and all of the things that we're talking about. We need progress.
Well, we will look forward to sharing that. And Laura, thank you so much for taking the time today. This has been very informative to me. I've certainly been scribbling notes throughout the conversation, so I know our listeners will enjoy it as well.
Perfect, Scott. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so thanks for your time, and thank you all for tuning in. We really do hope that you will get to work over the course of the next week. Let's make those telephone calls. Let's let our senators know the Texans of faith support these important priorities to care for our communities, for our constituents, for folks in our congregations. Now is the time. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next week. Remember that this work is supported by members like you, so make sure that your congregation and that you are members of Texas Impact by going to texasimpact.org/join. Friends, these are anxious times, but the world certainly needs the faith community active and engaged. So let's get to work. We'll see you soon.